to you, David.
Right, well, thank you, James, for that. I didn't quite understand. I've got -1 minute, I think, to speak to you. Anyway, when I got the invitation by GAMA and FIDIC to speak here, it was something I couldn't refuse to come. I was here just 42 years ago, flew down from Malawi to take over on a contract not far away on Strand and Adelaide Street. We were building a set of shops there in the Golden Acre area, and we were in dead trouble as a contractor. They thought I might be able to help it. Well, I came down. None of this building from about the Standard Bank down to the foreshore was here. And so coming 40 years later to see it is just magnificent. A tribute to the engineering capabilities here in South Africa. Well done. As far as myself, I stayed on 4 years, and the company prospered. We did 50 contracts here in this part in the Cape, and then I left, and then the company prospered and went on to build many of the buildings that we see around us. You'll see in the notes that it's now owned by Wilson Homes. Now, who am I? Let's see where I am with this thing, the value. Just make sure I got this right. There we are. David Heslett. The company I now run, ECV Consultancy, is one of the reasons I'm here, is we specialize in FIDIC training. I set this company up in 1993 in the former Soviet Union, which hadn't a clue about market economics, and in particular the construction industry there had no real understanding of contracts. Now, since then, that part of the world, especially in the eastern part of Europe, has developed immensely, and often they have used the FIDIC contracts, especially the 1999 contracts. I've been privileged with my team of about 8 engineers to help train people in these countries, and we've now worked in over 86 countries in the world, and we reckon we trained over about 30,000 professionals. So I feel one of the reasons I can speak to you is about my experience with FIDIC, but also a little bit about my African experience. You'll see here on the slide, I first came to Africa in 1970, got off a VC-10 and in Blantyre, and went down to the Shire Valley. Who knows Malawi here? Wonderful country. Who's been down on the Shire Valley, down to the Zambezi? Well, it's a bit tough down there, and we had 2,000 people to put together a 20-megawatt hydro scheme. And that was my introduction to Africa. What a wonderful continent. And I've stayed in it I then stayed in it for about 10 years, 5 of them down here. And then I went back to UK, mainly for personal reasons, and, but still had contact with Africa and built up African contracts in about 12 countries. No, it says 10. Okay, 10 countries. From Ghana, as I wrote it, I dare say it's right, from Ghana through to Mauritius, and from Cape here up to Cairo. Ironically, the Cape Flats sewage works, which we built, large sewage works at this end of Africa. I was also involved in building the Cairo wastewater scheme. So there's quite a bit in between, but got involved with that. I like to feel this has given me a little bit of an understanding of the situation in Africa with respect to infrastructure and sustainability. And that's the name of this course and of this conference, sustainability. And I gave some thought to that. And first of all, I've given you a few points of what I regard are key issues relating to a successful construction project. How many of you here are engineers? I'd like to feel quite a lot of you are. Okay. Are we any lawyers here today? No? Okay, mainly engineers. Wonderful. Well, not that I have anything against lawyers, but construction projects are done by engineers, and the FIDIC contracts have been prepared by engineers. But one of the key things I find, and I'm still involved in contracts around Africa, is that particular conditions are not as well drafted as they could be. So FIDIC have done very well with their general conditions, and that's the framework they put forward to employers. And then employers use that to create a contract with their contractor. But often, sadly, one sees that they've changed the rules and bent them, often in a way which conflicts with other parts of the rules. And so I just make that point to you, how important particular conditions are. And I then move on. People need to know, I often compare FIDIC to a game such as football. Everybody should know how to play the rules, the two teams. And you've got the touchline, you've got the penalty area, etc., size of the goal. And then you have the engineer, who you might term as the referee. And he has to also need to know the rules and make sure the two teams play by the rules. But of course, if the people don't know the rules, if the people haven't really understood the contract, then how do they play by it? That is a fundamental issue. And sadly today, although I've had over many years working in international contracts, I still see repeated mistakes of failures of either personnel from the employer, contractor, or engineer not playing by the rules. So there are a few points in that slide relating to that, but moving on to sustainability. I put up this slide here, put a little pointer on. Materials, plant and equipment, staff and labor. These remain the same. If I was building my Tedzani 1 hydro scheme, this would be very much the same. This is the key. And that's the key to construction, people. Earlier today, you had people speaking on finance, and they're saying one of the key issues is we must have competent people. If we've got competent people in the role of project managers, engineers, contractors, then we have much more confidence in putting in the money to get the projects done. So how do we increase in what is a continent where the population is increasing all the time? How do we increase our competent professionals for the construction industry? So I gave it a bit more thought and thought, right, this conference is run by GAMA. I'm putting a challenge down to them today. I read in the little notes here about GAMA. Capacity building, great stuff. Coordinate capacity building programs, sounds good. I move it a stage further. Why not initiate and have a program where you actually do the capacity building for engineering personnel throughout Africa? I know you have 16 members at the moment. There's no reason why you cannot have many more. And one of the reasons that may be attracting people to you is if you have a center, and one of the things you might have at that center is concentration on FIDIC contract training. And it would provide perhaps a test program endorsed by, or program of training endorsed by FIDIC. I was talking to some of my colleagues here today, and when I started training in FIDIC, it was all overheads, acetates, slow, pedantic. Today, e-learning has taken over, and it's a great tool now for this continent. And so, with a center that might be, for instance, Tanzania, where also FIDIC have a base, you could start to, hold on, amongst I get through to a summary, start to provide training for professionals throughout the continent, either through e-learning or running courses at the center. Provide a testing program endorsed by FIDIC to assess competence. So have some sort of standards of competence which would then flow back into the industry. Also provide guidance in drafting particular conditions. I mean, even in individual countries, different ministries prepare particular conditions in different ways. There should be much more standardization. And that gives confidence to the industry as a whole. It gives confidence to contractors as well as investors. if there's commonality. And it will also probably have, have some reaction on the pricing levels. Now, a key factor in all of this is, where does the money come from? Well, that is always the issue, isn't it? Well, I've given some thought as to where that might be. I'm going to go to the summary. Bear in mind time. Now, the first place I would go, I don't know, is anyone here from the developing banks? Anybody from here? I know they were down on the program. It's hard to see from here. There's a man waving at the back there, but I don't think he's from there. Anyway, it's a pity they're not here. They invest, I saw on the slide earlier today, there was what, about $6.8 billion was being invested in Africa. Was it something like that? If you just take 0.1% of that and allocate it to training, it would be well over, probably about $6 million, more than enough to run a competent center. So there's one source. It always amazes me that the MDBs don't recognize that when they loan the money to countries, that they often are giving it to, or providing it to, people who don't really understand the contractual obligations they're taking on when they undertake projects. It would be an excellent investment for them to put it into training, which will pay back many times, I'm absolutely sure. Another source, member associates of GAMA. It's in their interest for their members, their consulting engineers here, to have a center where they can send their young engineers to be trained, or use the e-training system. FIDIC may want to contribute, maybe not in money, but in resource in one way or another. Again, their documents may be offered in a more cost-effective way to the trainees in such a system. Private sector sponsors. I thought there's a chap in America, I forget his name, I'll try and remember. Yeah, Bill Gates. Bill Gates. He's got a few bob. I'd get on the phone to him. I mean, he wants to do good, don't they? All these guys want to do good. What more good can you do than help train up the professionals for infrastructure development in Africa? He wants to fight mosquitoes, I don't mind that. But why not do something like that? And there's another guy, Buffett, he's got a lot of money. You find, they must be in the phone book somewhere. And then, when I started my training business, it was in St. Petersburg. And they said, 1993, they said, you won't get anyone to pay. What do you mean you won't get anyone to pay? I'm a Yorkshireman, they have to pay. They can't come in the door unless they pay. So, sure enough, we ran a course and we charged them, and they paid. So I don't believe in giving knowledge. I think people should pay their way, but it has to be priced sensibly. And hence, there's another source of revenue there. There are ways to fund such a center. So I put down, have you rung the bell yet?
Yes.
Yeah, already, time's up. I put down the gauntlet then to GAMA. Great organization. It can do more. It can be better. It can do something for sustainability. I'll leave you with this thought. Unfortunately, we as people are not going to stay forever. When you look at me, you'll probably not be surprised at that. But knowledge can stay and be passed on. And that's what this is about, passing on the knowledge and experience that we engineers already have. Thank you very much.